The wind howled across the empty plains, carrying with it the scent of winter and the whisper of things long forgotten. A lone wagon stood broken on the side of a muddy trail, its wheels half sunk into the frozen earth, its canvas ripped by weeks of storms. Near it, a woman knelt beside a small campfire that barely clung to life, her hands trembling as she tried to warm her little girl's fingers. The child couldn't have been more than 6, her cheeks red from the cold, her curls tangled by the wind, yet her eyes still held a flicker of trust. The woman looked around the endless stretch of land. Nothing but snow, pines, and silence. Her husband had ridden off 3 weeks ago, promising to find help, promising to come back. But promises didn't keep a fire burning, and they didn't feed a child. He hadn't returned, and the trail behind her was empty. She didn't even cry anymore. She had run out of tears days ago. All she had left was her daughter, and a name she could no longer bear to speak. As the morning sun broke through the gray sky, she wrapped her daughter in a torn blanket and whispered softly, "We'll move, sweetheart. We can't stay here." Her voice cracked, dry from thirst and fear. She looked down the trail that led west. Where she'd heard there was a small settlement near the river, a place where folks didn't ask too many questions. She had no wagon horse anymore. So she gathered what little she had, a tin cup, a small Bible, and a locket with a man's face she could hardly remember. The road ahead seemed endless, but she carried her daughter in her arms and began to walk. Each step sank into snow, each breath burned her lungs. But she kept going, and because stopping meant death. The girl shivered, clutching her mother's neck, whispering, "Mama, where's Papa?" And the woman's heart cracked again as she whispered, "He'll meet us there, baby. He'll meet us soon." But deep down she knew he never would. Hours passed until her legs gave out. The sky turned gold with the setting sun, and shadows stretched long across the plains. She stumbled and fell to her knees near a frozen creek, holding her child close, praying for a miracle she didn't believe in anymore. Then, through the quiet, came the faint sound of hooves. She lifted her head. In the distance, a figure on horseback was riding slow, cautious, scanning the land like a hunter who'd seen too much. A cowboy, broad-shouldered, hat pulled low, a rifle slung across his saddle. She wanted to call out, but fear choked her voice. She had learned the hard way that not every man who came riding out of the wilderness brought kindness. The cowboy stopped his horse when he saw the smoke from her dead fire, his hand resting on the grip of his gun, eyes sharp but curious. He dismounted and walked closer, boots crunching in the snow, his shadow stretching over her. "You lost, ma'am?" he asked, his voice steady but low, like someone used to the quiet. She didn't answer at first. She just clutched her daughter tighter. "Ain't got nothing to take," she said, trembling. The cowboy looked around, one at the broken wagon, the cold child, the woman's hollow eyes, and then sighed. "Ain't here to take nothing. Just looks like you been through hell." He knelt down slowly, removed his gloves, and held out a canteen. "Here, drink. You look like you ain't had water in a spell." The woman hesitated, but her daughter reached for it, and that small act broke her fear. She took the canteen, drank, and felt warmth spread down her throat. "Thank you," she whispered. The cowboy nodded, glancing at the sky. "You can't stay out here tonight. Cold'll finish you both off before dawn." She looked up at him, unsure, desperate, afraid to trust. "Where would we go?" she asked. He pointed west. "Got a cabin not far from here. Ain't much, but there's a roof, a fire, and stew on the stove." She didn't move. Her heart fought between fear and hope, between what she'd lost and what she might still save. The cowboy saw that hesitation in her eyes and added gently, "You can leave come morning if you want. Just don't let the night take you first." Something in his tone, calm, steady, honest, told her he meant it. She nodded faintly. He helped her to her feet, lifted her daughter into his arms, and led his horse through the snow. As the wind picked up and the last light faded behind the hills, the woman with no name followed a stranger into the unknown, clutching the last bit of hope she had left, unaware that this man would soon give her not just a home, but a name, a life, and a love that would change everything. Snow began to fall in thick, slow flakes as the cowboy led the woman and her daughter through a narrow trail lined with pine trees that whispered in the wind like old ghosts. The air had turned colder, sharper, and every breath stung the lungs. The woman's feet ached, her dress torn and damp from the snow, yet she followed in silence, her eyes fixed on the stranger ahead, a man she didn't even know the name of. His coat was worn, his hat covered with frost, but he moved with quiet confidence, as if he'd walked this trail 1,000 times before. The little girl in his arms had fallen asleep, her head resting on his shoulder, trusting the warmth of a man she'd never met. The woman wanted to ask who he was, why he was helping them, but fear and exhaustion silenced her. Finally, the trees parted, and there it was, a small log cabin sitting in a clearing, smoke rising faintly from its chimney, a golden glow flickering through the window like a promise of safety. When he opened the door, the heat from the fireplace hit her face like heaven itself. Inside, the room smelled of wood smoke and stew, and the sight made her heart ache. She hadn't seen a real home in months. The cowboy laid the child gently on a cot near the fire, then turned to her. "You best sit," he said quietly, hanging his hat on a hook. "You look like you ain't slept in days." She stood near the fire, trembling, not from cold this time, but from everything breaking loose inside her. He poured a bowl of stew, thick with beans and venison, and handed it to her. Her hands shook as she took it. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. He shrugged, sitting across from her. "Because somebody should. Ain't no reason a woman and a little girl should freeze out there alone." His voice had that rough kindness. "Only men who've seen too much. Loneliness, Carrie." She stared into the fire for a long moment, then said softly, "We were heading west. My husband. He was supposed to meet us. He went for help." The cowboy didn't ask the rest. He didn't need to. He saw the truth in her eyes. The man wasn't coming back. He leaned back, poking the fire with a stick. "Name's Colton Hayes," he said after a while. "Used to ride with a cattle outfit down in Abilene. Now I just keep to myself out here." She looked up at him, her voice low. "I used to have a name too, but it don't feel like it belongs to me anymore." Colton studied her face, the kind of quiet pain that spoke louder than words. "Well," he said softly, "you can borrow mine for the night, if it makes you feel safer." For the first time in weeks, she almost smiled. Her little girl stirred in her sleep and whispered, "Mama," and the woman reached down, brushing hair from her daughter's face. "Sleep, sweetheart," she whispered. "We're safe now." The words felt strange on her tongue. Safe, like something she'd forgotten how to believe in. As the night deepened, the storm outside raged harder. Wind howled through the cracks. Snow piled against the two-door, and yet inside, the warmth of the fire wrapped around them like a fragile shield. Colton sat by the window, keeping watch, his rifle resting across his knees. He didn't know her story, but he didn't need to. He'd seen too many broken travelers on these plains, people running from war, from loss, from ghosts that didn't stay buried. Something about her felt different, though. There was strength in the way she held her daughter, in the way she tried not to cry. He respected that. When she finally spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. "You should have left us out there. You don't even know us." He looked at her, steady. "Ma'am? You don't need to know a person's story to know they need help." She turned away, eyes glistening in the firelight. Hours later, when the storm finally began to quiet, she lay awake on the floor by the fire, watching the flames dance. Her daughter slept soundly beside her, wrapped in an old quilt Colton had given them. She thought of all that had been taken, her home, her husband, her name, and for the first time, she allowed herself to wonder if this stranger might be the beginning of something new. Colton, half dozing in the chair, opened his eyes once, glanced at her, and whispered to himself, "No woman should look that lost." He didn't know it then, but by saving her from the snow that